Good evening. My name is Andrew Spainhour, and it's my privilege tonight to welcome you here. I am the board chair of the Greensboro Public Library Foundation, a presenting sponsor tonight. The Library Foundation is an all-volunteer public charity that raises private money to support the 8-branch Greensboro Public Library system, enhancing public investments made over many generations. We, in addition to bringing you here together tonight for an extraordinary best-selling author, in addition to underwriting events like this, we also provide all of the funding for summer reading for children as well as adults, and we provide funding for our citywide read, One City, One Book. We provide enhancements such as the pirate ship at the Glen McNary branch, 3D printers and public art in our branches, and we also provide additional materials for our collections. It's a privilege to do this work, and it is, again, it's all volunteer. In 2022, the Library Foundation successfully advocated for passage of City of Greensboro bonds for the construction of the Windsor-Chavis-Nocho Community Complex, which will transform the corner of East Gate City Boulevard and Benbow Street. It is a $65 million public investment. A groundbreaking last November drew a multitude. We will, as a city, say when we are done that we have honored the community that built it, as well as the people it will serve. And the Greensboro Public Library Foundation will raise additional money to support this transformative project. So on behalf of the Library Foundation's board, thank you for being with us this evening. It is a great privilege to be with you. Your presence means a lot as we work to build a community of lifelong learners. It's now my honor to hand the microphone over to Lynn Wooten, who is board chair for Greensboro Bound.
Good evening. Good evening. I can't believe we are at the grand finale of our official season of our book festival. I hope that many of you were able to join us just a couple of weeks ago for Percival Everett. And all day, a couple of Saturdays ago, we had a great turnout, we had a great lineup, and we are already planning for next year. We're going to go a month earlier next year because there's a thing called graduation and Mother's Day and some other things. And so mark your calendars now for Saturday, April the 11th. But we are thrilled to have this bookend on the end of our season with Cristina Henríquez. And we are so grateful to our partners with Greensboro Public Library and their foundation and Creative Greensboro. The wonderful Bridget Blanton, head of the library and the History Museum, is on our board, and she has been a wonderful asset, and we thank her for her support and hard work and belief in our mission. We have given you tonight some surveys. I hope that you will please do this. We got a record number, I think, of surveys in 2 weeks ago. And these really help us to fine-tune what you want, the programming, where you want to have it, everything. So they really are very meaningful, so I hope you'll do it. Finally, we pride ourselves on bringing our programming to the public free of charge, 100% free to the community. And we can't do it without partners such as the library, thank you, Andrew, the Library Foundation, and many, many others. I didn't bring my notes tonight. The entire list is on greensborobound.com, so I hope you'll go and look at it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your support of Greensboro Bound. We welcome your support. We can't do it without your support, so thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Boone. I want to get this right. Chief Creative Economy Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to my home. I lead the Office of Art and Culture, which is called Creative Greensboro, for the city of Greensboro, and this is our home, this building right here. We're not alone. We are also home to 18 other cultural organizations and nonprofit institutions, including 4 public galleries, this beautiful facility right here, and a black box theater, and a multitude of other wonderful cultural things. We are so proud, and we're excited to support and honor Greensboro Bound and the Greensboro Library Organization, to support them because they're bringing vibrancy to our city. These are the kinds of events that connect us, that educate us, and help us all feel a bit safer and more like community. So we're just excited that they decided to partner with us again this year. We're excited for this evening. Thank you all for coming out, and we also want to enjoy the show together. Thank you so much for being here. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Bridget Blanton. She's the Executive Director for the City of Greensboro and the Director of the Library and Museums for Greensboro. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening. Good evening. Okay, so I'm a call and response kind of girl. Good evening. Good evening. There we go. I want to make sure you're awake. So, it is always the Greensboro Public Library's honor to partner with our community. So we're really excited this evening to be in partnership with Greensboro Bound and Creative Greensboro. And of course, as always, our financial support, the Greensboro Public Library Foundation, to bring this event to you this evening. In 2002, the Greensboro Public Library embarked upon an adventure to see if we could get our city to come together around the reading of one book. One City, One Book was born that year. We have had a wonderful array of books that we've read together, laughed about, and even cried together. I would like to announce the 2025-26 One City, One Book choice. My Father's List, How Living My Dad's Dreams Set Me Free by Laura Carney. As many of you might know, our selection committee has several criteria in their selection process, and one of them is the ability for public programming around the themes of the book. We believe this year's selection offers many opportunities to participate in discussions, learn more about yourself, and to try some new things. Stay tuned for additional information on our website and our social media. What we can say, we've done a lot in the past, but it ain't been like this ever before. You're going to hear something and see something different, and I didn't mean to say ain't. So right now, we're going to get to the reason we're all here this evening, and I would like to bring to the podium Tita Ramirez to introduce our guest for this evening, and welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. Okay, so, yeah. Thank you so much. How does that sound? Okay, I can see almost none of you, which is a little bit great and a little bit freaky. So, but that's life, right? Life is a little bit great and a little bit freaky. Okay, I'm gonna wear my dorky glasses, sorry. Thank you, first of all, to all of you for coming out on a Wednesday night. That was looking pretty rainy, but I think is now looking pretty decent, right? Before I introduce you to the star of the show, I want to say a few thank yous. First, to our community partners, Greensboro Bound Literary Festival and Creative Greensboro. Next, to the Greensboro Public Library and the Greensboro Public Library Foundation for sponsoring this event, and for financially helping us out, if you know what I mean. And while we're here talking about libraries, can we just stop a minute and sort of reflect on how amazing libraries are and how they are the best place in the world, the most democratic place, the most egalitarian space in a society. The library is for everyone, right? Whether you're there to pick up the next book from your favorite mystery writer series, or You're there to use the computer to apply for that job online, or you're there to sit in a chair that's just your size in the children's section and sound out the words to that book that the librarian brought in for you. Or you're sitting at home at your kitchen table downloading an ebook or an audiobook on your Libby app. The library's for you. And we're so grateful that we have an amazing library system. One last thank you and shout out before I move on and talk about the reason we're all here. To the head of our fiction programming, Beth Sheffield, who's sitting in the front row, without whom none of this would be happening. As well as to all of her staff and volunteers. And also to Jody Stanley, who will be on the stage in just a few minutes with Cristina Henríquez. Jody is the International Support and Language Access Coordinator for the City of Greensboro, and I know this is going to be a fantastic conversation between her and Cristina. So, now to the business at hand. I have the honor of introducing you to fiction writer Cristina Henríquez, and that means I get to tell you all the fancy stuff about her, like how she is the author of 3 novels and an excellent collection of short fiction called Come Together, Fall Apart. All of them critically acclaimed, about how her work is filled with beautiful writing, literally unforgettable characters, and just amazing plots. I get to tell you that her last novel, The Book of Unknown Americans, which I was just discussing with a former student and pal, was a New York Times bestseller, and how her latest novel, The Great Divide, visual aid, which she and Jody will be discussing tonight, was a Today Show book club pick, one of Time Magazine's 100 must-read books, and a New York Times Editor's Choice selection. And that's like not even talking about the awards and the, being a finalist for the Joyce Carol Oates Award. Like, we can't even, we'll be here all night if I try to tell you about all the great stuff that's happened with Cristina's work. So I also get to tell you, though, that Cristina and I have known each other for almost 17 years. In 2008, I read Come Together, Fall Apart, her collection of short stories, and I fell in love. I wrote to her and I invited her to be a visiting writer out at Elon University, where I teach, and to my great delight, she said yes. I picked her up from the airport, and before we even got to the hotel in Elon, we were friends. It happened that fast. In these 17 years, I have seen Cristina grow as a writer, as a literary citizen, in ways that have just been so exciting. When she told me that she was going to write about the canal, though, something she hadn't done yet. She's been writing about Panama for years, for her whole career, but she hadn't yet written about the canal. And when she said, I'm doing it, I'm finally going to do it, my heart just swelled. When I tell people about this book, about The Great Divide, what I say is, it's about the building of the Panama Canal, except it's not. It's about the people. The ones who built it, the ones who built a life around it, all of whom are trying to save something. It's about, among many others, a Panamanian father and son, Francisco and Omar, who need to save their relationship. It's about an American couple, Marion and John, who want to save the world from malaria and who also need to save their relationship. It's about a 16-year-old named Ava, who's a stowaway from Barbados, who needs to make money in order to save her dying sister. You guys, when I tell you that this book is a triumph, I am not kidding, and I'm not being hyperbolic. It is meticulously researched and thus completely fascinating from a historical perspective, but it's also a true examination of what it is to be human. And thus, it is enlightening, heartwarming, heartbreaking, and even funny. I can't wait for you to read it. So I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to say that we can now all welcome the final writer for this year's Greensboro Bound Literary Festival, Cristina Henríquez.
Thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, that was,
We're all really excited to hear from you.
that was a lot of buildup. My gosh. Thank you, though. Thank you.
No
No.
pressure's on.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I wanted to start chatting with you about was we got to talk a couple weeks ago and kind of chat about this program. Can you give me a second? Give me a second. We'll let the sound work itself out here. Is that better for everyone? All right. So we had a chance to chat a couple of weeks ago about this program, and you talked about your dad, and I found that so endearing and so touching to learn about his role in the writing of the book. Can we kick off with that? Can you tell us a little bit about the role that your dad played in the development of Great Divide?
Yeah. I'll just echo quickly. Everyone said so many thanks, but I just want to say also quickly, I know it takes a lot to put these programs together, and I just want to thank everybody who made it possible for me to be here and everybody who came out tonight. Yeah, my dad is kind of a through line of a lot of my work. My dad is from Panama. He came to the United States when he was like 17, 18 years old. He came with a student visa. He was going to go to college at the University of Delaware and study chemical engineering. And he thought he would get his degree and then go back to Panama where his family was. And he ended up meeting my mom instead and staying in the United States, and they got married and had kids, and so I was the oldest, and then I had two younger siblings. But we always, my whole life, have gone back to Panama to visit my family there. So since I was 8 months old, I think we've been going and taking, basically our de facto summer vacation was always just to go to Panama for a few weeks. And we would stay with my grandparents. You know, we weren't going as tourists. We weren't in a hotel. We weren't doing all of the kind of touristy things. We were like going to the pharmacy and getting my grandmother her prescriptions, and we were like hanging laundry out to dry and all of that kind of stuff. So I had like a real kind of intimate experience of Panama somewhere in my soul. And so I think it's not surprising when I started writing fiction that somehow I would work my way to that kind of territory. But it was always sort of because of my dad. And then when I was working on this book in particular, you know, I had to do a lot of research to figure out 1907 Panama, but 1907 just sort of in general in the world. I had to like read all sorts of ancillary material to try to give myself the context that I needed to be able to write this novel. And a lot of the things that I was researching, I was able to find. Like I needed a train schedule, you know, from New Orleans to like Knoxville, or, you know, stuff like that. Easy to find. I needed to know the ice cream flavors of, you know, an ice cream parlor that happened to be in Tennessee in 1907. Easy to find. When it came to finding material about Panama, that was quite a bit more difficult, right? The historical record wasn't preserved in the same kind of way. And so I had to kind of, you know, go at it at kind of some odd angles sometimes. And a lot of times it required calling different agencies in Panama, talking to different people. And so that's when I like employ my dad. He sort of became my unpaid research assistant in a sense. And I'd be like, can you call this place and ask them this for me? And then he would get on the phone and he would do it. Or there was a time when I wanted a reader for the book, and I wanted someone like pretty specific. There was a scholar I had heard of, I had read her work, who was she had worked on a lot of material about the construction era of the canal, especially from the perspective of the West Indians who had worked on it. And I wanted to try to get in touch with her, and I like sent an email to the place where she worked, but it was just kind of one of those general info emails, and I never heard anything back, and I was kind of bemoaning to my dad, oh, you know, I would love to reach out to her, and I don't know how, and I would love to get a reader. And then the next thing that I know, he cold called the place and then talked to someone and explained, my daughter's writing this novel. She wants to get in touch with this woman. And the person on the phone was a little reticent, like, I'm not giving you her number, right? You understand that? Somehow my dad charmed him into giving him her number. My dad called this woman on a Sunday out of the blue. She answered the phone, and then he told her the whole story. My daughter's working on this novel, and she wants to get in touch with you. And before I knew it, my dad was calling me to say, I have a Zoom call set up with you and this woman. And I was like, amazing, right? Like, but I think he was happy to do that. He would, I mean, that's how he is in every aspect of just like being a father, being a parent. He would sort of do anything, yeah, for us. And yeah, it was really fun. But yeah, I mean, my parents, they would be in Panama on vacation, and I'd be like, can you stop at the National Library and look at the microfilm that they have on, you know, and that's like sending me photos. So
The libraries
yeah.
played a role, right? Wasn't there a librarian in Panama
Yeah.
that you worked with previously?
Yeah. I mean, I could not have written this book without libraries and without librarians. And I don't say that just because of the venue where we are and the people who brought me here today. I really, honestly, it's like, I am so indebted to the librarians who helped me out at every stage along the way. And one of them was, there was a library, the Canal Library in Panama. I wanted to go there. My dad said, oh, I went to high school with that guy, so the head librarian there, you know. So I could put you in contact if you want. So he took me out there. This guy was showing me all these kinds of artifacts that I never would have had access to outside of Panama. So yeah, it was pretty incredible. But I mean, I will say, like, also my local librarians, like they, God bless them. I would send them emails, especially this one, Mike. I mean, almost every day I was sending Mike another email or two, you know, like, can you get me access to this journal article about the Barbados hospital, you know, in 1906? I need to see it. Can you tell me about fishing lines and what they looked like in Panama? Oh, I need to know something about stethoscopes. I need this map of Bridgetown. Anything that I could think of. I literally would just like draft an email, and poor Mike probably saw them all pop up in his inbox and was like, oh no, it's her again. But I mean, he told me he enjoyed it, that he had fun tracking all of these things down, but I did utilize the librarians quite a bit to be able to do all of this. Yeah.
And I can't imagine the pleasure they feel in knowing they supported an effort like this. You know, when they go to read it, I mean, how cool is it?
Yeah, they're in the
Contributed to that.
acknowledgments. I was like, my librarian heroes.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah.
So one of the things that Tita mentioned was the history and the way that you took these nuggets of history, but you wrapped them in humanity. So you're not reading a history book, you're reading about the people. And I felt like I absorbed so much. There were some things, and I wrote them down, that I had never learned before. So I was born and raised in Bolivia. I've traveled all up and down the east coast of the United States and Canada. But there were things about the Panama Canal that I had never heard about Panama. So I didn't know the French were the first to try to build the Panama Canal. And basically the mosquitoes chased them out. I mean, there's more to it than that, but it was mosquitoes that really caused major issues.
Yellow fever really
Yellow
decimated
fever.
the ranks of the French.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, they didn't know at that time what they knew only like 20 years later. So yeah.
Yeah, so which is why I love the way you tied in the story with the John Oswald, right? And you kind of, again, you took that story about how the French failed and why, and you tied it into the story of John and Marion Oswald. I didn't know Panama was part of Colombia. I had no clue. And the role of the United States in Panama's secession from Colombia, and the way that the United States sort of flexed its muscles, and you know, there was a lot more to it than just helping Panama out, for sure. It was certainly in the interest of the United States to build the canal. And then the U.S. returned ownership of the canal back to Panama because of an agreement in 1977. I think that was the other piece that I really... So when we talk about the history, talk about all these different research pieces, you felt really responsible to stay true to that. Tell us about some of the things. I know about your approach to research. You certainly discussed a lot with people, you got a lot of resources, and you were constantly moving. There were a couple of things, like, I know you talked a little bit when we spoke a couple weeks ago. For example, in the development of the book, the original iteration of this was about Ada and Omar, right?
Yeah, the
Can you
whole
tell us
book just started
Right.
with just Ada and Omar.
Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I had the idea for this novel about 20 years before I started writing it. And I've been carrying it around in my mind with me, and it was a little bit of a scary idea because it felt like a big topic, right? I mean, the canal itself was so kind of monumental, so significant, that I just felt like if I'm gonna tackle it, I have to write a book that's equally big, right? And that felt a little scary and overwhelming to me, at least at the time when I first had the original thought that maybe I would write a novel about the Panama Canal. So I just carried it around with me for a very long time. And eventually when I felt sort of up to the task, or that I could at least attempt the task of writing a book like this, I still, in some part of me, I think was like chickening out. So I just wrote about two characters, which were Ada and Omar. And so I think it was this sort of like hedging. It was like an attempt to finally write the Panama Canal novel I had always wanted to write. But I did it in the way that was still somewhat small.
It was safe.
Yeah, yeah. I felt like it was manageable. Like I could handle following two characters around for the entirety of a novel, but something bigger than that still felt like too out of my reach. And so I wrote that whole draft. I sent it to my editor at the time, and she read it, and I thought I was done. Like I was sort of like, yes, I have written my Panama Canal novel that I have wanted to write for so long. And she read it, and she said, no, no, no. And her one note was, it has to be bigger, which is, I think I knew that, right? Like in my gut, but I was resisting it. I was still scared of it. But she said, it has to be bigger. My agent was like, well, you know, we'll send it out to other places, don't worry. And I was like, no, no, no. I think she's right. Give me a week to think about it, and I'll get back to you. And at the end of the week, I had thought it through, and I said to myself, if it's going to be bigger, there's only two ways that I can conceive of to make it bigger. One is to elongate the timeline. Right now, the book only takes place within a few months. And I thought I could elongate the timeline because the actual construction era happens over 10 years. And I was like, I could take up that full 10 years and write a novel over that span of time. Or I could include more characters. And just on the basis of sort of instinct alone, I thought it seemed more interesting to me to start folding in more characters and seeing what would happen then. So, you know, I had Ada and Omar, and I had mention of their families. None of them were fleshed out in any way. I didn't even know their names in most cases. But I knew, like, Ada had a sister, had a mother. I knew Omar lived with his father. And then I just sort of went about trying to figure out who those people were. And then from there, it all just sort of kept building and building and unfolding until before I knew it, I had this whole cast of characters. And they all sort of were working together in this miraculous way, and they were all speaking to me, and it was honestly the great joy of my writing career to like sit there for 5 years and listen to them. And yeah, so I don't know, I ended up with, I don't know how many there are. In some cases you only hear from a character for like one paragraph, and then you never hear from them again.
Michael?
Yeah, there's Michael, and there's like the coroner who comes at one point, and he just like has a perspective, and then you never are in his consciousness again. I felt like those were sort of interesting things just to try to do and see what I could get away with as I was writing. And I have more characters in the computer somewhere who are not in this book.
Make it to the book.
Yeah, like more that I've written. And then I finally just had to draw the line somewhere, you know. It could have just endlessly kept rippling out, it felt like.
Yeah, the character development, I think I'm fascinated by that. You did mention that as well. Having grown up in Bolivia, I think because my mom was a U.S. citizen, I could really relate to the experience of John and Marion, where it was almost a lonely experience.
Yeah.
You captured that
Very.
extremely well.
Yeah.
Where they were powerful, but they were also powerless. They were somewhat resented but also respected in their way. And that was the way that my family existed in Bolivia. The way that you captured that nuance, it really touched something in me. It was important for me to connect with that and read it. But then you've got Antoinette, who's the cook, and the way that she's totally petty towards Ada, she's kind of mean to her.
Yeah, totally.
But you get it. Like, you took those. It's not about. You know, there's such reality. I think there's such nuance, and it's those little details. Antoinette being petty, and then Joaquin is hilarious. Those two crack me up, right? So, what were those moments for? Where you came up with those ideas? I mean, you really have to sit with your own humanity, I think, and you have to sit with people and spend time with the people. But there's a level of empathy that I think you have to have as well. Being able to understand and feel.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in the first question, when I said that I had the idea 20 years ago and I didn't feel up to the task, I hear writers say, and sometimes I will say in an event, like, I didn't think I had the writerly skills. You know, but I don't know if that's true. I heard another writer reframe it as, it isn't that you didn't have the skills, it's that you didn't have the humanity yet, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and I think that probably was true. Like, I needed 20 more years of living to like get to the point probably where I could write these characters in the way that I wrote them here. Although it's also interesting to hear you say, like, you said something that pointed to like my own agency in it, like how did I create them, or it was I don't remember the words exactly, it was something along those lines. And when you said it, I thought to myself, I don't feel like I did, right? Like, I feel like I sat around long enough, like I plant a seed, right? Like, I have to know something in the beginning, right? It's like, okay, I want Omar to be this boy who's Panamanian who works on the canal. There's the seed. Put it in. And then I just sort of sit around. It sounds really weird, but I have to like listen to him reveal himself to me. It's less that I'm doing something and more, if I'm doing anything at all, it's what I'm doing is I'm just paying attention. I'm paying like deep attention to these characters, and something that they say makes me understand the next thing that they will say, or one line that I write makes me understand the next like move that they will make. It's more about that than about me sort of moving them around, at least when the writing's going well. That's actually how I know when the writing's not going well. When I feel myself like pushing them across the room, like manipulating them too much, then I know I'm too involved, right? It's too authorial. And what I need to do is somehow figure out a way into them deeper, right? Like into their consciousness. I have to get to know them
They
in a deeper
exist.
way.
They exist, you just have to find a way in.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, some of the characters you're describing, the other thing it was making me think is like, they're not all likable, right? Like Antoinette is very petty and sort of vindictive, and she, you know, she wants to be the sort of head person in the house, and she's resentful of Ada's presence, and you see all of that. And there's lots of other characters who make terrible decisions that are very self-serving and all of that. And I think we're beyond the question of like, does it matter if characters are likable? But I really don't care. When I'm reading something, what I care about is not whether I like the character, it's do I understand the character, right? And so as the writer, that's the place I'm trying to get to too. I'm trying to write characters not that anyone will necessarily like or not like. I don't actually think that matters. What I'm trying to write is characters who you will understand why they are the way they are. You know, you understand that Gertrude is upset enough to like throw her lemonade glass down because she like is lonely in her marriage. Like she has an inattentive husband who like, you know, feels like a certain way about. And I think if you can understand the characters, then that's the important thing for me as the writer and as the reader, and actually probably in life, right? Like forgetting about reading, Like, I think maybe there's a little too much, like, I like her, or I don't like, who cares?
Yeah.
Do you understand them?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like, that might be the more important thing.
And I think that's such an important conversation. I know with international support and language access, this particular field is really difficult right now because of the national discourse around immigration. And for me, it's about understanding the humanity in the people. It's about understanding them. It's about spending time with them, sitting with them. So in the same way that you're sitting with your characters in the book, I think we need to do that with each other today.
Yeah.
Right now, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the humanity of this book was what was important to me. You know, there's lots of books that you can go right now. You can go to the Greensboro Public Library. I'm sure there's lots of books that will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about the engineering of the Panama Canal, about the geopolitics of the Panama Canal. But there were very few things that I came across that were emphasizing like what it was like to live through this time, right? Like the humanity behind what it took to build this thing. And yeah, that was always sort of my focus in this book.
So you talked about the experiences, what it was like for the people. Your dad also, I remember you telling a story about your dad. And there was something about, they were taxing, or the trade that was crossing the Panama Canal. There was something about import-export.
Yeah.
And they were, your dad was talking about his own personal experience with the canal.
Well, the canal has like a long legacy, right? So the construction era ends in 1914, and it's like, okay, so now the canal is ostensibly built. It can handle traffic, but you know, there's a long reverberation of the canal's presence, and more specifically, even the canal zone presence, which is the area around the canal where people lived, and that was like cordoned off as a U.S. military base, essentially, for many, many years until the turn of the century when it was handed back over to Panama. But you know, my dad, yeah, he has stories of growing up in Panama and, you know, trying to go from one side of the country to the other and being stopped at checkpoints and having to show IDs and maybe not being allowed through at times and stuff like that. And, you know, there's a part at the end where Francisco goes to the canal and he describes it as a wound. And he describes it as a wound that was never meant to heal. And I think for a long time, for a lot of Panamanians, there was that sense that maybe not the canal itself, but the canal zone and this area of demarcation that they were kept out of was, you know, there was a bit of pain that was associated with that running through the middle of the country.
And what about the impact on the people? I know something that we talked about too is the diversity in Panama, and a lot of that was driven, I mean, Panama was always a diverse country, but the diversity increased tenfold with the building of the canal.
Yeah, it was always a crossroads for commerce for many, many years for, you know, Spain, and they would come and get gold and move through Panama and all sorts of things. But when the French came, I think that was the first, well, actually building the railroad, which happened in like 1850s, that was sort of the first big influx of people coming to Panama. And then when the French decided they were going to try to build the canal in the 1880s, there was another influx of people. And then when the United States was there from 1904 to 1914, there were a whole bunch of other people. I mean, I think I read the stat somewhere that it was like 90 different countries on Earth sent people to work on the Panama Canal at that time. And many people stayed, you know, and they didn't just build the canal, they really built the country in a sense. You know, they really changed the landscape and the demographic of the entire country. And you can see that today still.
Right. So one of my favorite quotes of Francisco when he said to the fumigators when they came to spray for the mosquitoes, he goes, "I was born here in the Americas, therefore I am an American. We were Americans long before you were."
Yeah.
And I feel pretty strongly myself, personally, just about the use of the word American. So I avoid it. I'll say U.S. citizen or, you know, United States.
Well, in Panama there's a word which is United Statesian. Is how it's
right. Yeah. Growing up in Bolivia, we never said American. We said the states. We called it the states. So there are other ways to handle that. I think it's just a personal commitment that I've made. And when Francisco said that, I was like cheering. I think my neighbors heard me because I was reading outside.
Yeah.
Like, yes, Francisco. My other favorite part is the part learning about the Panama hats. And where the guy said, I forget who it was that said it, but he's like, the Panama hats came from Ecuador.
Yeah.
Who was it? Who was it that said
Yeah,
that?
it's Joaquin.
Joaquin.
I can read that.
Yeah,
part.
you want to read that
Yeah.
part? That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great, because it's so associated, like even in cinema, like we all associate the Panama hat.
Oh,
And the
yeah,
fact that it came
absolutely.
from Ecuador.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember when I learned that, and I was like, I have to use that somewhere. Okay, yeah, this is a fairly short section. For anyone who hasn't read the book, this is from the point of view of Francisco, who is this native fisherman from Panama, and his son Omar has decided to go work on the canal, much to his dismay. He really, really doesn't believe that the canal should be happening. And it's led them not to talk to each other. And I think the only other thing you need to know is that Francisco refers to the canal as the mouth. Francisco felt that same bitter feeling come flooding back when, many months later, Omar told him that he had gotten a job working on the canal. At the very suggestion, Francisco had flown into a fury so that Omar would stop saying things Francisco did not want to hear. The problem was that it worked. It was effective beyond reason. Not only did Omar stop saying things Francisco did not want to hear, but he stopped saying things altogether. And Francisco, in his rage and disappointment, decided that for one entire day he would do the same. For a full day, he walked past Omar, looked past him, ignored him completely. He should have ended it there, having gotten his point across. But when Francisco woke up the next day, the outrage still boiled. So he did it again. Maybe 2 days in a row would change the boy's mind, make him reconsider his mistake. By the third day, Francisco was mostly annoyed that his silent protest was not having the desired effect. He could feel Omar looking at him at times, but the boy did not speak, did not apologize, did not ask for forgiveness, said nothing at all, and Francisco understood that they were both dug in. It was a cockfight in which both of them were pecking at the air, circling each other to see who went down first. Francisco resolved it would not be him. An action born from righteousness quickly transformed into one sustained by pride. Now he had said nothing to the boy for nearly 6 months.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. You know, Francisco is one of those people, I think he could come across as really cold and harsh to someone who's outside of him and who can't get inside of his mind, but that's what I love about books.
Yeah.
And the way that you wrote Francisco behind the scenes is he's actually a very tender soul. And he has a hard time navigating the grief of losing his wife the way that he did and trying to process all of that, raising a son. Like, he was a good dad. He did it in the way that he could, you know? And I think that goes back to what you said. It really struck me the way you said, do you understand them?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand the people?
Mhm.
And I think for sure I'll take that away as a challenge tonight. It also strikes me the power of one decision and how it can shift, just in general in life. One decision can completely shift the future, right? If Ada had not saved the stranger's life, then Omar couldn't have gone back to reconcile with his father.
Mm-hmm.
Valentina, she's the one that makes me laugh. If she had not decided to stay in Gatun and fight for her people, I mean, the resistance wouldn't have started the way that it did. Considering the Panama Canal has come up in national discourse, do you feel like maybe the decision for you to write this book might become one of those, like it might become a part of this larger dialogue at the global level about the Panama Canal? And do you think that your book will play a role in humanizing both the past and the future? Because I think it's about the people. It's always been about the people. What do you think about your decision to write the book and the role that it has
Well,
today?
it's interesting because when I, like I said, I thought about the idea many, many years ago. And then when I sat down to write it, I mean, there were a number of times as I was writing it where I said to myself, is anybody going to care about a novel about the Panama Canal? Like, it felt really personal to me. It felt super meaningful to me that I finally write this book. But there was a big part of me that thought, this is like what is this? This is just part of history that I don't know if anyone cares to revisit, will be interested in any way. I certainly couldn't have anticipated that it would suddenly be part of a national discussion, right? And that I would like be seeing it on CNN or like in the New York Times. It's like, what? That's, I mean, that is definitely not something that I could have foreseen. It's been interesting knowing everything that I know about the canal, to hear the way that it is spoken of now in this sort of national discussion. I mean, you know, I think this goes back to the way that things are taught in schools and stuff. Like, I don't know, I certainly wasn't taught anything about the Panama Canal. I can't remember that in any textbook, and you know, and I think some people have told me, oh, I learned a little bit about it, but it's like, you know, it's sort of a side note kind of thing. And I think it's true then that you have a lot of people now who don't really know very much about the history of it, and so there's a lot of things that are kind of like going around, and you know, people are accepting those things at face value, whether or not they're actually true. And I don't know, all I can hope is, you know, first and foremost, I write books because I'm trying to work out something for myself a lot of times, right? Something that I feel I'm trying to like work out on the page. I'm trying to create characters that are memorable or that are compelling. I'm trying to write sentences that are beautiful. Every once in a while you get that great moment as a writer where you write a paragraph that's like better than anything you thought you could write. Like it all sort of comes together and you're like, oh my gosh, yes! Like, and you live for those moments. And I think, you know, I want to write stories that, I don't know, that people, that make them think, that make them feel. I really went to great lengths to research this in a way and to present it in a way that was like accurate, right? That would be faithful to history, that imagined all the parts of history that were not recorded to the best of my abilities. And I don't know. If it teaches some people something about the canal, I think that's amazing. But I mostly, yeah, I hope that people just sort of pick it up and will be engaged, and you know, they get out of it what they get out of it. I don't know. I think, and I also think, like, you know, different books, they're sort of meant for you at a different time, right? Like, you find a book at the time you need that book somehow. And so maybe there's completely things not about the canal at all, like something about a lonely marriage that may resonate with somebody that's in this book, and that's what they need from it. And I think that's a beautiful thing too.
For sure. Well, and that's the power of those choices, right? It wasn't that Ada was setting out to save Omar. She was doing the right thing at that time.
Yeah.
And I think even the description, the way that you wrote the book, there's an intimacy to it in your own process. I remember you telling me that you woke up early in the morning and you wrote it by hand.
Yeah, I wrote the whole thing by hand in notebooks, unlined notebooks, which was very important to me. I was really stuck before I started working on this book, and sort of I had a teacher in graduate school, Elizabeth McCracken, who had suggested, I had just remembered, she said, you know, if you're ever stuck, then change up your work habits. If you usually write on a computer, try writing by hand. And I started writing by hand, and it really kind of like unlocked me in this way. And I think having the unlined notebooks, like I didn't even want to be hemmed in by those lines, right? Like I really wanted like maximal freedom as I was creating. And so you should see my notebooks. They're like I'm writing like diagonally and like down the page, and then there's like arrows this way, and then I had to come up with this like elaborate numbering system and different highlighter colors just so that I could keep track of what the heck I had done by the end of the day. Like it was just like a bramble of words. But it was,
you saved these notes, right?
Yeah, I have them all, but it's like, it felt great while I was doing it. And there was an intimacy because, a lot of this I was writing during the pandemic. My whole family was home. I knew that the only like truly quiet time I was gonna get in a day was if I got up really early. So I was getting up at like 5:30 so that I would have 2 hours to myself. you know, it's the winter, the light, like sunlight's not out yet, turn on the desk lamp, and I'm sort of just me and my notebook and a pen, and I'm just like crouched over the page. My eyes are very bad, so I'm like, you know, I was very close, and I did feel, you know, that I had this like physical closeness, but then a psychic closeness because of that, partly to the characters. I felt really deeply connected to them. I mean, I felt like, I think I said this to you, like it was, I had this sense that it was the first time I had written a real book.
Really?
Yeah. Like it was like, this was my fourth book, but I was like having the experience that I had heard other writers talk about in terms of that feeling of connection. And yeah, and it was just magical. And I was really sad when it ended, in a way, to be out of that, right? So, yeah.
I mean, I feel like you left it open enough that you could probably give us
Do a sequel.
part two. I'm just saying, there's options, right? No, I mean, hearing you describe it, it makes me want to go back and read the book again. Because I had my own experience, but then just hearing your own experience as the author, the way the development, the creation of it behind the scenes, it's really incredible.
Yeah, it was fun. I filled about 5 notebooks, which were all like a pretty, like 8.5 by 11 size notebooks, and I would just, yeah.
That's awesome. So I do want to go back and revisit this conversation around immigration, because I feel like it's really relevant. And even though you didn't set out to write a book that would, you know, the discussion would be on CNN and what have you, I think we're dealing with a season right now where immigration is definitely a hot topic. And you've discussed this not just in this book, but in your other books as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching a podcast with Lupita Nyong'o yesterday, who's the actress from Black Panther, for those of you that don't know her. She was sitting with Trevor Noah, and she was talking about her experience at Yale Film School. She was trying to learn a new accent, a U.S. accent, because she felt like it would make her more versatile as an actress, right? So she's a student. She kind of
What is that? Is it Midwest? Is it, like, I was listening and I was like, oh, like, some of the people who were speaking at the beginning sounded like a friend of mine who I know is from North Carolina.
Right.
It's like,
even
what's
the
the U.S.
regional
accent?
accents that we have here
Yeah,
in the States.
exactly.
But there is a way that we speak. There's a very distinct accent that's very different from like English that's spoken
Sure.
in Liberia or Kenya. English is spoken in Australia. For the most part, there are definitely different regional accents. But,
Yeah.
So she's trying to learn like a mainstream, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe there's a mainstream.
Whatever, like a news anchor,
A
national
news
news
anchor.
anchor.
There you go. There you go.
Accent. Okay.
She's going for the news anchor.
Yeah.
So she was talking about the experience, and she basically delved into this method acting, where she would even call home to Kenya and talk to her parents and talk to her family with the U.S. accent, right? So at the end of the school year, she goes home, and her family is making fun of her because she now has lost her Kenyan accent. She thinks she's going home and she sounds like everybody else, but they're keying in on something else they hear in her. And it kind of broke her heart because it was a break from identity. And there's a point to this story I want to tie back in, but there was grief, and she talked about that grief. And so one of the show hosts on the podcast, she said, well, you know, I'm sorry that happened, but she's like, the beauty is African actresses, you've opened the door, you're a pioneer, they can now go into this field and they can speak and don't have to learn a different accent, they can use their own accent. She said, she's very polite, she said, yes, that's possible, but she said I would still tell them to learn the accent, because what that accent opened up for me was a whole new world, both personally and professionally. Personally, it helped her develop and connect actually on a deeper level with her identity, because now her experience in the U.S. is now part of her identity, and her experiences are going to change. Her identity is going to change as she gets older. She understands now what that means and how to connect with that, and so it gave her a sense of groundedness that she didn't have before, interestingly enough. And then of course professionally it opened doors for her. It's fascinating to me to tie that back into the conversations around immigration, because what I see daily is that I think most people are wrestling with this really big question, and that is, if I let you in, what will that cost me? So if I accept you into this country, if I give you a piece of what we have here, what is that going to cost me? And I think her answer is, it will cost you. There is grief involved. Sometimes it's messy. But the payoff of inviting migrants into this world, we were migrants once, our families migrated to this country, right? The payoff in the end is dividends. You can't even quantify it. I think you touch on migration in such a unique way. There's so many different reasons that people move to different countries. But what I love about the way you write is you don't tie it up in a neat bow. You don't provide solutions. You're not saying here's the way it should be, here's the way it could be, or here's the perfect scenario. You're kind of letting the situation sit, and the reader has to. You really make the reader responsible to sit with that. So I want to hear from your perspective as the author. Is that intentional? And what's your strategy behind that? The way that you write the stories.
Well, I'll say first that it's funny because, my previous book, which was much more about, directly about immigrants, book about known Americans, I had come out of that book and I remember saying to my husband, I'm writing a totally different book now. This Canal novel is like a completely different book. And then he read a draft of it. He was like, you wrote the same book, right? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, it's still immigrants. And I was like, oh, right, okay. But it's not the story we typically think of, right? So to the characters in this book, especially to the native Panamanians, the people who are coming from North America are the immigrants, right? And so that was like an interesting kind of reversal, right, in terms of perspective and how we think, what we think of when we think in terms of immigration, and the effect of having, again, all of these people from all of these different nationalities, all of these different countries descend in this one place at this one time for this one purpose, and how radically then that changes Panama and and all of how it changes the dynamics of all of the people who are there. That's all stuff that that suddenly, unwittingly, I was writing about again in this book. And I think it's just something that is sort of endlessly fascinating to me. But what was the other part? It was a lot. You asked something at the very end that I was going to say.
I just want to comment on something you said, Liz. I think a lot of times people here in the States, of course, we're thinking about people migrating here. People are constantly migrating all around the world.
Right.
And so this is the perfect example of how people have moved from different spaces, moved into Panama, and it's shifted the culture, right? And part of my point was there's pain associated with that. There's some discomfort. Yeah. But it pays off. I mean, the beauty in the end is the diversity, right? But I think the other piece of it was the way you leave the reader responsible to sort out their own thoughts about how things should or could be.
I do think, it's not at the forefront of my mind as I'm writing, but I do think I have a general philosophy as a writer that part of my job is to ask questions and complicate them, not to ask questions and answer them. Right? And some of it is I'm doing it for myself. A lot of what I write about are things that are sort of on my mind in this nebulous way, and I'm trying to work them out for myself on paper, right? It's like there's some disturbing, uncomfortable thing in the world that I'm trying to understand. And then if I write it down and I can kind of articulate it somehow in words, then that helps me work my way through it. So I do feel like that is part of my mission, that's part of my job. Again, it's not, when I sit down at the desk in the morning, I'm not thinking to myself how can I complicate all of these questions for readers? But I do think I'm working under the assumption that it isn't my job necessarily to answer anything, to resolve anything, to wrap anything up. It's my job, again, hopefully that you read work and it makes you think and makes you feel. To me, that's what art is for, right? And that's one of the amazing things about reading a book or listening to an amazing piece of music or, encountering a painting or, any kind of encounter with art, I think is about ultimately, it's about being able to practice your humanity in a way that is safe, right? Like to be able to feel lots of things about characters who don't exist. It's like what that does for you is that when you finish the book, you put it down and you're walking around in the world, now you can feel those things. You have the experience, you've had the practice, and you can better feel those things for real people who you may encounter in the world, and have a different kind of interaction with them, have a different kind of communion with them, hopefully, right? Instead of like an isolation from them, because you've practiced that by reading a book and being willing to be in somebody else's consciousness. To me, that's really the purpose of art, I guess. You know, and there are certainly practitioners of it who are, you know, I mean, there are lots of people who do it who are much better at it than me, but that's always sort of the aspiration. That's my goal, sort of, as I'm writing, is to complicate that and to welcome people into that experience of being able to feel things and think things that they may not have felt and thought otherwise, right? To enter into the consciousness of someone who they may not ever meet in their life, but that makes it easier to meet other people in their life.
Right. It's not such a foreign experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they've had the experience reading the book and they felt those things. Yeah. Asking questions to complicate them. I think that's a phrase I'm going to take with me. I've learned so much, but I've been hogging you this whole time, and I believe there's an open Q&A now that we want to move into. So, Beth, do you want to? But let's give Cristina
Oh my gosh,
a huge
I can
round of
see
applause.
one.
I know.